You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. I'm Mike Cornell, joined by CEO of Spark Launch, Chaya. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course to the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya.
And today we want to welcome to the show Josh Rastetter, a neurodivergent father, product manager, and self-proclaimed data wizard, who's here to share his unique perspective on navigating the challenges and celebrating the strengths of neurodiversity. Welcome.
Yeah, fantastic to be here.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for being part of it. Tell us about you, your childhood. How was it growing up, not knowing you were neurodivergent, but living as a neurodivergent person? How was life?
Yeah, so my school career, especially through the end of high school, was a struggle, to say the least. I did okay, and I think I did okay because, I have a very high IQ. I have a lot of processing power, and I was able to kind of just kludge my way through it. But yeah, it was a struggle finding motivation and doing things that I didn't care about, just to get by. It was a cause of a lot of conflict between me and my parents because the constant narrative there was, we know you're so smart, we know you can do better. Why are you doing just enough to get by? And that was the constant, push and pull. Was they wanted me to do more and, thought I was capable of more, and that I was just lazy. That was kind of this, and a lot of that was internalized. A lot of that I internalized on myself because I thought I was just lazy, and, couldn't ever figure out why I couldn't, get my act together and really apply myself, because I also knew that I was smart. Yeah, it wasn't until, later in my college career and on into my professional career that a lot of that really clicked and started getting better, where I could really apply myself as long as it was something that I was interested in.
You brought about a very important point that your parents thought you were lazy and you believed that you were lazy.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot, right, with children, especially children, because they soak in all that information that's given to them, that's being fed to them, the good, the bad. They can't tell the difference. And even you mentioned IQ. I'll bet you didn't know that at that time, you didn't know that the IQ, you were good enough. Those things were never really highlighted, I'm guessing, because that's the same with me. So it was still like, it's an inner knowledge. You just have that belief you are good, but the world is constantly telling you you're not good. It's the parents, it's the education, the grades. At least for me, I think I'm just talking about me, but that's how I felt. I wonder how you felt about that, about someone calling you lazy and feeling lazy and believing you were lazy, but not really. You have this high IQ. How was that internal conflict within yourself?
Yeah. So I knew I was smart because there was subjects in school. Like in school, I either got A's or C's and there was nothing in between, so if it was a subject that I was interested in, then I got an A and I got it effortlessly. If it wasn't something that I wasn't interested in, I got a C, and that's only because I pushed myself enough to get a C so that I could pass the class so I wouldn't have to take it again, So it was, yeah. So like overall, my average was average, but I knew that I was smart, that I had the ability. It was more of a lack of motivation, and no external factors could make me care about something that I didn't care about. And that's, I think, where a lot of the internalized laziness, came from.
How would you say, with that internalization, do you feel that there were certain things you kind of did or uses maybe like coping mechanisms or whatnot that were ways of like that internalization to escape?
I'm try to put myself back in that frame of mind. And honestly, when I was in school, I just didn't care about school. School was a roadblock to doing the things that I liked doing. And I got in trouble if I didn't pass. So I did what I had to so that it didn't become a roadblock to the things that I wanted to do.
It was what was it like? I guess it would have been like numerous things, but was it like the structure of the way the education was presented, not only just like the disinterest?
There was a lot of that structural stuff too, especially in math. The structure of how math was presented made it very difficult for me. But what was weird and how looking back, I eventually realized that it wasn't an issue with math conceptually, is that I was really good in chemistry. And chemistry is just math applied practically. It's algebra, but it's algebra applied where you can see the result, right? It's a practical application of algebra. And chemistry, because it was interesting to me and because it was more concrete, it clicked, it snapped, and it was easy. I didn't have to put a lot of effort into it. And that actually caused arguments between me and my parents, because they were like, chemistry is just math. You have algebra in the same year as chemistry, and you're doing poorly in algebra, but you're doing good in chemistry. And like they could not square that round peg. They could not figure out why one math was hard and the other was easy.
So what did that do to your feelings towards math? How did you feel math was, and did you come to any conclusions there?
Well, I hated math. Hated it. Hated it until like 2 or 3 years into college. I had to take a math class, couldn't avoid it. And the class that I took was like college algebra, but it was like, because I was in art school at the time, it was, college algebra for artists, basically. And, it just was presented in a different way. And my professor was incredible. And what he actually figured out for me during that time was that I had dyscalculia, because I would do the work, I would show my work, and it would be wrong. But that's because during the process and how I was mechanically supposed to be showing my work, I would transpose numbers. And so if you followed my work, I was giving the correct answer, but it wasn't the correct answer for the question asked. And, he saw enough of my work and and paid attention and cared, that was another big part of it, that he was able to identify that and help me accommodate that. And after that, I did fine. Still wasn't a big fan of math at that point, but I did fine. And, ended up, I think, with an A in that class. But it was simple enough as, instead of asking me to show my work with numbers, that he just asked me to write out what my thought process was and let me do it all on the calculator.
I have dyscalculia as well. So everything like, yeah, that's me with numbers. And I get numbers backwards a lot. There's certain numbers that are connected in my mind. I don't really understand why, where it's like the number, I think it's 13 and 27 swap sometimes when I'm reading numbers or trying to remember numbers or anything that involves those particular, like if they're in the combination somewhere, they'll inevitably 13 will become 27. And I don't know why that happens, but it happens.
That's wild. For me, it's fives and nines. Fives will becomes nines and nines will becomes fives. Yeah. If I'm trying to remember a number, a number that has fives and nines in it, especially if it has both, the fives will inevitably be where the nines were supposed to be, and the nines will inevitably be where the fives are supposed to be. Even if I know that that's what is happening, it still happens.
It's so wild. Like, it's so hard to describe it to people because it doesn't make sense, like, to us either, like why certain things happen. Like, I always go back to this weird, I think it was third grade, where I mean, math was impossible for me. And multiplication specifically was like really hard at the time. But they started to teach us division. And for whatever that 1 year, I was a whiz at division. I could just walk up to the blackboard and do every problem there like immediately. Could not multiply to save my life. And teachers were so confused. So I could do one and not the other because it's just the same thing, but reverse. So I don't why can't you get that? I don't know. Just the numbers are now moved in a different direction. So now my brain can understand them better.
Yeah, it's crazy like that. Yeah. The way I do mental math is I've explained it out to people a few times, and it's so weird, but it works for me. It's a lot of extra steps, and it would be easier to just do it the same way that you would write it out, but I have to. I don't know. It's just a system that I have come up with over the course of my life that is the only way I've ever been able to do mental math and not have it get mixed up or sideways. And it involves basically squaring out numbers. So, going up to the next 10 or, to the next nearest 5, because 5s and 10s seem to be okay for me. And then putting numbers together as I need to, and then subtracting the adjustments that I made at the end. So even saying it out loud, it's kind of hard to explain, but say that I was adding 13 and 12. I would make 12 into 10 and 13 into 10, put the 20 together, and then add the 2 and the 3 together to get 5, so 25. It
sounds so familiar to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Extra steps. It's, when I explain that to a lot of neurotypical people, that is a wildly weird way to do it, but that's the only way I can.
No, it's akin to you can't solve a jigsaw puzzle, so you take a hammer and break all the pieces into smaller pieces, and then you can solve the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, basically, that's a great explanation.
And you can put it in a way that you want to, right? When you give that freedom and say, I'm going to put back that jigsaw puzzle, like the way my brain works. When you're given that freedom, it suddenly works, right? So for me, it's just on the education. It's just the non-linear thinking. I can't tell you how important that is when I get the freedom to go explore what I want to do. Maybe I want to study the last chapter first. Maybe I want to see, I usually like to get that end result to see where I'm headed, and then maybe just jump to chapter 5 and then chapter 1 and just chase my curiosity. It's that'll help me get that full picture. So even now with Spark Launch, I give myself freedom to explore and build the way I want to. Of course, when I present it, it's going to be in a way that can be understood by people, but the way I learn is so different, and I love that freedom that I've given to myself. Actually. So, Josh, you mentioned the conflict with the parents. So, was it with education, or was it more than that? Because I had plenty of conflicts with my mother, actually, because she had a lot of rules, and I like to question every single rule. And so, what was your experience with that?
Well, on the whole, I have and had a pretty good relationship with my parents. So it's not that, we were constantly fighting or really had a poor relationship or anything like that. They're great. And, I love them dearly, but they really there was certain things, especially in academics, that they just really couldn't understand that led to conflict. Nothing horrible, but definitely there was misunderstanding of what was going on, and they were worried that I would have a hard time finding professional success if I couldn't do well in school. So in their mind, those two things were linked, and they thought if I was being lazy at school, that the same thing would happen in my professional life. And to a degree, they're not entirely wrong. I had many jobs where it was just a job and I was doing it to get a paycheck and wasn't super interested in it. And, I would stay there for 6 months to a year and then churn out, but, that comes from, having a job to get a paycheck and not a career that I'm actually interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think we all agree that we need a deep understanding of the why to follow something.
Yeah.
So when somebody says just study, just get good grades, it doesn't fully resonate at all. Actually, it doesn't resonate at all. And so when any kind of a rule was given to me, and still is, I want to know the whole thing as to why. I want to know every part of it. And so it's really important that we present it that way as parents too, right? And having a neurodivergent child, I know I can get through a lot of things that I want to communicate to my child by presenting, first of all, by understanding who my son is and presenting it in a way that they fully understand, because that's exactly how I am. And so, yeah, so I had wonderful relationship with my parents too, but there was a lot of conflict. And only when it came to rules, because I didn't understand them.
This is going to sound bad, but there was a certain point, especially like once I was a teenager, where they kind of gave up trying to make rules. I think they learned about the time that I was 13 or 14 that punishments had no effect on me whatsoever and were not a way to modify my behavior in any way, shape, or form. And it's not that they just let me do whatever I wanted to, but the rules became suggestions and guidelines, and punishments became formality. They knew that they weren't effective. I knew that they weren't effective. So, they would say you're grounded. Then I'm like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, and leave, so that was kind of, especially my later teenage years, it was kind of this Cold War of sorts where they kind of knew that they didn't have a whole lot of power in their rules and punishments if I didn't care about them. And so we just, rather than causing each other a lot of stress, we kind of fell into a pattern of doing our best to respect boundaries on both sides.
I had a similar experience. The rules started becoming easier and they kind of just tapered away as I got older. Definitely high school, my mother stopped monitoring my education. And then in college, my social life. And of course, there was full freedom because I married who I wanted to, especially with the arranged marriage situation in India. I did everything that I wanted to. But it's amazing when you honor yourself, because ultimately you're the one living your life, right? So it's really important to bring back that focus to us and figure out what works for us, right? And when you're given that freedom and responsibility, you actually turn out to be okay. And that's how I feel. That's why freedom is really important. And self-governance, teaching individuals how to go towards the right direction and why it's important to do things that are going to have a positive impact is critical.
Yeah, for sure. And, there was a lot of things that, my parents taught me just by example. They didn't have to say it out loud, but just by example, they taught me, kind of my sense of morality and my boundaries and my lines that I wouldn't cross. And those were innate. Like I didn't have to self-regulate to make those things happen. They just were. And, when they kind of came to the realization that I was going to do what I was going to do, and there wasn't much that they like, fighting it was just going to make us both, stressed out. So they would ask questions, they wouldn't let me just go and, often do whatever I wanted at any time, but they would ask questions and make sure that I was in the right mindset and was going to not make the worst decisions, if not good ones, and then they were like, okay, yeah, call me if you need anything, or if you get in trouble. Don't do anything too stupid that you can't come back. That's kind of how my teenage years played out. And then, college was an entirely different story because it was something that I wanted to do, and they didn't push me to do.
Yeah, the drive's always there for us when it comes to any number of things. That we feel passionate about. And I mean, that's true of neurotypicals and neurodivergents, but especially neurodivergents who just don't, there's the Bruce Lee quote about becoming water. We don't really become water. We kind of are stuck in our ice form, essentially. So we have to go with what we are. Shifting gears a little bit with these kind of like issues with numbers, but you're the way you're able to adapt them to more of your interests of for like chemistry and whatnot. When it comes to coding and like your career in that, how has that kind of like aided you, or you've had to adjust it to suit your needs?
That's a great question. So coding is strange because it's parts of it come very naturally to me, and it hasn't had to be a lot of adaptation because it's already applied maths. But other parts of it, the really abstract stuff is harder. So, and my accommodation for that has been with a lot of comments and notes. I basically have to put a lot of comments in my code to tell me what it's doing, right? Especially if it's function or something that I've borrowed or taken from somewhere else. I really have to break it down and understand it and then put comments in there, because if I understand it today, there's no guarantee that I'm going to understand it tomorrow. So there's a lot of that where I have to go in and put in a lot of comments and notes to myself from myself, because I've learned that I can't rely on a eureka moment being there next time I come and look at that code 6 months from now. So, and that's mostly with borrowed code, code that I got from the internet, or that somebody else wrote, or a library. That's where I have to do a lot of notes to self and clarifying stuff, and sometimes I have to break it down like line by line and break it, make it not work so that I can make it work again to really understand it.
You took me back to my 22 years of coding, which I just loved. I loved writing code and the comments. What a good practice that is, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. And you want to capture that eureka moment, right? And it's just beautiful how that eureka moment comes when you're in the flow, when you're just going with that flow and something happens. And that's why it's important for us to be in the hyperfocus as well, because all of those eureka moments come when you're hyperfocused. And of course, when you're interested, when you're in love with what you're doing, when you're enjoying it, actually, it's a pleasure. And it's just beautiful how that creative part of the brain just starts exploding and you start picking up a lot of information. I could even just not even hear my colleagues' words when I was in the hyperfocus mode. It was just this, like I had this noise cancellation headset without having a noise cancellation headset when I was in that hyperfocus mode.
Yeah. Where you put the blinders on and everything else gets tuned out. The other thing that I noticed was very helpful, and I just kind of happened into this as a practice, but pair programming, where you work with a partner, that helped my code quality like a lot, because I would write something and then have my partner check it, A, to make sure it made sense to them too, and B, to catch my dyscalculia swaps, things and stuff like that would happen, because there was times where I'd write a query or something and I would transpose a number and get a wildly weird result that didn't make any sense, and having another pair of eyes to come back and catch those things was incredibly helpful in a lot of cases.
You have particularly like long sessions of coding or large projects that are maybe a little more complex. Do you have difficulty like maintaining focus on those, or is that something you're able to like really get that hyper focus mode in on?
It depends on the project. So if it's a problem that I am intrinsically motivated to solve, then I can go into that hyper focus and work on that for 16 hours straight without pausing to drink a water break, which is not great for self-care either. But yeah, so it depends on the project. So for work stuff that is just meeting a deadline, Yeah, it can be hard to keep that focus on occasion. But a lot of times when it's a problem that I have intrinsic motivation to solve, then yeah, I can kick in that hyper focus and go until I'm forced to stop, basically.
Does the same apply to whenever you're learning like a new technology or a new type of skill that's been introduced that you kind of have to like figure out? Is because I go back and forth on a lot of certain things that are related to passions where I have to learn something new in regards to it's doing CEUs or something. And while it's like definitely a quote unquote special interest, I hate that term. Even then, I sometimes have difficulty kind of like maintaining that focus, maintaining that ability to learn, maybe because I think it's a lot of like self pressure to learn it efficiently and quickly. And other times, maybe if it's a little bit more simplified or if it's just a adjunct to something, I'm able to go into that hyper focus mode and learn very efficiently without worrying about it.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced both of those scenarios. And a lot of times where I struggle is when it's something that I need to learn to get to the thing that I really care about. So those intermediate steps. Like I want to solve this problem. To solve this problem, I need to learn this type of function in Python. I don't really care that much about Python, but to get where I want to be, I have to learn Python. So, and that's just a random example. So that intermediate step of learning Python, I can get impatient with, and sometimes we'll hit a wall, where I am bored with like this the really elementary surface level stuff, but don't have a strong enough foundation to skip to the more advanced stuff. And I kind of hit a wall where I'm stuck in this middle realm. And sometimes I have to recognize when I'm in that space. And what I have found to be the most helpful thing to do in that moment when I'm starting to feel frustrated is to put it away, not forget about it, not go on to something else, but let that become a background process in my mind. And then go on, do something else, get dopamine back up, put some focus on meditation, put some focus on spending time with my kids, something that is going to help refill my cup. And then oftentimes I'll wake up the next day and the thing that I was having a hard time with will click, and then I can keep going. But it's all about some of that self narrative is like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to put this as a background process for right now. And then I'm going to go refill my cup.
You brought about a really important point. I see that in myself too, is that it's so important for us to be close to the problem. And that's why you want to bypass some of the steps and just go close to the problem. And all the other steps are just feel like obstacles. Because so I want to feel the problem and then come up with the solution. So understanding the problem is critical. And the more closer we are to it, whether it's meeting our clients and getting close to see the pain of whatever we are trying to solve is critical. And then you figure out solutions. And I saw that as you were describing your coding, same thing, all that. And that's why the frustration happens, because you want to get to the solution really quickly. You're like, oh, I don't want all these methods, but sometimes you have to go through those methods. So just walking away is what a great idea, and just giving space for yourself. And
yeah. And early in my career, I would get in this bad habit or this bad pattern of giving up, throwing up my hands and saying, I can't do this or whatever, right? Negative self-talk, basically. And that would kind of close that thread in my mind. And then it would be much, much, much harder to come back to it. So, over time, I adapted this idea of, okay, I'm getting frustrated. We're not making any more progress. This is not giving up. I need to recharge. So we're going to put this as a background thread. We're not going to forget about it. We're not giving up. We're going to come back to it, but my cup is empty. I need to go recharge a little bit. And that helped me keep the motivation to continue moving forward while also giving me the rest that I needed so that my brain could make those neural pathways.
You mentioned meditation earlier. What's your favorite way to get in that headspace?
That's a great question. I'm not very good at it, but I also know that it's very important. So the unsatisfying correct answer is a new novel way every week. I'm always chasing something new that will help. The most consistent thing, and it's not very consistent, but the most consistent thing for me has been putting on my headphones, picking up my guitar, and just trying to get in a liminal space by playing music, noise canceling headphones, no sound, and just trying to fill, eyes closed, and just try to fill as much of my senses as I can with something rhythmic and pleasing to my nervous system.
What do you like to play?
Mostly just chord progressions. I just run through chords, simple, power chord progressions. Yeah, just looking for something that massages my nervous system.
So you create your own meditation music because that's what I do. When I meditate, I'm listening to certain frequency, the meditation frequency, whatever that may be, so that you can zone out, right? And
yeah, and I can't meditate if my hands aren't busy. So that the act of playing music helps keep my motor cortex, I guess, occupied, and allows me to start closing those extra tabs that are open.
That's why for me, cooking a lot of times is when I meditate. I move around a lot whenever I cook. I do not stand still. I'm doing like 50 different things at once. How I don't destroy my kitchen, for one. Also, every meal I make is a miracle. But yeah, I can't sit still. I tried for a long time. An old therapist recommended it to me. Old therapist, I want to point out, for those type of specific reasons. So it is cooking or just doing something very monotonous that I can let become kind of white noise of activity, or the motor kicks in and it's going. I'm not even paying attention to what I'm doing at a certain point. I do that with a lot of like games, or if I need to like do a crossword puzzle or, or jigsaw puzzle or something. Just gives me something to continue to do. And then I look down and I don't even realize that I finished it. And my mind's been wonderfully blank for like an hour.
Yeah, it's so important to know that meditation is not just that picture that they put out there, right? Just sitting and doing it a certain way. It's so many things for me too, like cooking and painting, walking. I can meditate, but it's important that I'm doing something. But I also have learned to sit in a place and meditate. Now I do it as a practice, everyday practice, for about 10-15 minutes by visualization. It has to be something else. It can't just say, just make it a blank slate. It will become blank, but we're doing something else. I think we have so much energy in us that we have to be walking, doing something else, like with that excess energy we have in our body.
Other go-to kind of meditation is Minecraft. Sometimes I'll pull up a blank new world in Minecraft and just try to clear an area, so just break every block in a 16 by 16 area, something very repetitive and monotonous, but that requires some focus, and that will help get into that liminal state. Important that not doing anything creative in that time, but just a repetitive task that requires some focus and motor function.
I too like doing that. There's nothing finer than a completely smooth area that you just spent like 2 hours on.
Just flatten the mountain. Go find a mountain, flatten the mountain. Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a child who's neurodivergent. So
I do, in fact, yeah.
How's that parenting a neurodivergent child? And are you taking your lessons from life and passing that along? And what are your challenges?
Yeah, so the first 7 years, well, from really just 2 years. So from the time that she started school to the time of second grade, so 2 or 3 years in there was a bit of a struggle. Because I hadn't been diagnosed myself. I could see that she was struggling with a lot of the same things that I struggled with, but I didn't understand the why yet. And I was trying to help her in the same way that I would have liked to be helped, but she's similar to me, but she's not the same. And we really hit a wall during the pandemic when we were doing distance learning. She could not do it. She couldn't. And I found myself in the same shoes as my parents, where I had this internal narrative where I was saying, it was laziness, or, like that it was defiance, that it was willful, and that I had to get her to listen, basically. And it was frustrating for me, and it was frustrating for her. And then through the universe interceding, I'm not really sure, but through TikTok and through the internet, I came across some content creators that were making content about ADHD and its symptoms and, these experiences. And suddenly everything kind of made sense. And at first it made sense for what she was experiencing. And then it makes sense for what I'm experiencing or have experienced. And that was when we both decided, and with some support and recommendation from teachers and some fantastic support staff at our school, we went and sought evaluation for my daughter and ultimately for myself as well. And once we had that knowing, that confirmation that that's what was happening, it was a real paradigm shift, both for me and for my daughter, because these tricks and, accommodations that I had been making for myself for years went from being something innate and that I wasn't doing on purpose to something very purposeful and very intentional. And it made a huge difference. The entire narrative between me and my daughter changed, and it became a metaphor that I like to use is playing the parenting game on co-op mode or playing it on versus mode. And before that day, we were playing on versus mode. It was my willpower against her willpower, and one of us was going to win and one of us was going to lose. After that day, it was co-op. It was us against it was PvE, players against the environment. So we knew that we had a goal that we had to achieve. We had to get her through the grade. We cared less about what the grades said and more that she was just absorbing what she needed to and that she was doing her best. And as long as she was giving her best, that was all that we asked for, And if that meant that she got a C, okay, you did your best. I can't expect more than that from you. And some of that was driving her to give her best because she didn't always want to, when it became a narrative of we're doing this together and not you need to do what I say, and building that trust that, hey, I am on your team. I'm on Team Layla and we're going to succeed together. That changed everything.
Yeah, it's the same. I had the exact same experience, and it's so amazing that when you do that, so that means you have to drop your ego, at least through my experience. That's what I felt of being older, having had so many years of experience, and then actually get on their side and actually work with them. It's magical, and it's beautiful how things will start resolving on its own. But with parents out there, what breaks my heart is that because of this negative, the stigma around the name and with the diagnosis, people are in denial. They'd rather not get the diagnosis. They'd rather think that their child is normal. And as a result of that, they are not learning so many things about neurodivergency and about the individual. And that breaks my heart because of the name, because with ADHD, it's way more than attention deficit. I mean, because they can have attention, right? And it's not a disorder. There's nothing wrong with the brain. But because they don't want to get the diagnosis, that they are not learning and not working with the child. So it's so critical to get a diagnosis. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the brain. It is the way that's the brain. And let's learn to work with it. and not try to make the brain something else.
Yeah, a great metaphor that I heard once, and I wish I could remember where I heard it so I can give it credit, but the disorder, what I heard is, the disorder comes from a zebra pretending and trying to convince itself that it's a horse every day, going in a herd of horses, trying to be a horse and internalizing, your own disappointment at the fact that you're not a horse. When you are a zebra in a herd of horses, that is where it becomes a disorder. Is when you stop trying, when you're trying to be something other than a zebra. But if you put a zebra in a herd of zebras, it doesn't look weird. There's no disorder, right? The zebra is being a zebra, so that is kind of a metaphor that I like for it, and a lot of like the medication and treatments that, conventional medicine and conventional science would prescribe is trying to make a zebra into a horse. And the only way that you're ever going to have a positive outcome is if you let the zebra be a zebra. And, sometimes that means telling the horses, hey, that's a zebra and it's okay that that's a zebra, and other times it's putting the zebra with other zebras, but, there's a place for medication. I don't want to say that I'm anti-medication, but only when the goal is to make you a better zebra and not make you a horse.
Yeah. I love the zebra metaphor. I just pictured the zebra painting the black stripes away to make it a horse, right? And that's masking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that ultimately, if it showers, the paint's going to come away, and the stripes are going to be shown, and it's going to feel uncomfortable because the zebra has been trying to hide its true colors. And I just love that metaphor. I was always looking for two animals, and I used to say, oh, make cat a horse or something, but I just love the zebra and the horse comparison. And it's okay for the zebra to be in a group of horses, right? The zebra should be comfortable standing out and being itself. And it's important for the other horses to recognize that it's okay for the zebra to be zebra, and we like you, zebra, for being yourself. It's not just the zebra, but it's also the environment.
About removing the baseline, the mirage of baseline, quote unquote, normal.
Right.
Because continuing with that metaphor, the baseline of a zebra and a horde of horses is the baseline is horses, if they want to make a baseline. But if you put a horse in a herd of zebras, the baseline zebras. It's all, you can create one out of thin air no matter what the situation is. The truth of the matter is there is no true baseline. And when you don't try to force people into the mirage of baseline normal, that's when they're able to thrive. That's when you're able to listen and understand and not repeat the same echo chamber of experiences of past generations that didn't know better than to go about things the way they went about things, because that's the way they grew up, or that's how they learned, and instead go a little bit outside their purview.
Yeah. It's all about understanding that it's okay. Like there is no normal. Normal doesn't exist. Everybody is some shade on the spectrum, and wherever your shade happens to fall, it's fine. It's you, that's fine. And you are okay, as you are. And, you don't need to be anything that you're not.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh, for sharing your insights with us, giving us a little bit view into what has transformed you over the course of your life, and helped you and your daughter's life equally. Where can everybody kind of search you out and find you and contact you if they would like?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, for professional sources, and you can find me at my website at rastetterpm.com. That's probably the best ways to get in touch with me at this time. Working on building out my social profile a little bit more, but right now that's where I'm easiest to get in touch with.
Great. And I'll be sure to include all of those into the show notes for this episode, so everyone can find them there. For Spark Launch, you can always find us at sparklaunchpodcast.com. We're available on all the various platforms. Please rate and review us if you'd like. You can follow Chaya at _SparkLaunch on Instagram. And of course, we're both on LinkedIn. I'm at Follows His Ghost on Instagram. And there you can find links to my peer support groups, starting in also just an autism support group here soon, and anxiety and stress. Thank you again, Josh, for joining us. And we'd love to have you back on sometime. But for now, we'll see you next time.